Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to read the story The Four Feathers, written by Ruskin Bond. This story originated from his school days when he was in Shimla in a prep school. Ruskin Bond is an eminent contemporary Indian writer of British descent. Contemporary means he is alive. He was born on 19th May 1934 in Kazauli, Punjab, British India, to a British couple, Edith Clarke and Aubrey Bond. He was awarded the Sahitya Academy Award in 1992, the Padma Shri in 1999 and the Padma Bhushan in 2014. Some of his famous works are The Room on the Roof, Our Trees Still Grow in Dehra, The Blue Umbrella, A Flight of Pigeons and The Night Train at Deolai. Now let's read the chapter. Our school dormitory was a very long room, about 30 beds, 15 on either side of the room. This was good for pillow fights. Class 5th would take on Class 6th, the two senior classes in our prep school, and there would be plenty of space for leaping, struggling small boys, pillows flying, feathers flying, until there was a cry of "Here comes Fishy" or "Here comes Ollie," and either Mr. Fisher, the headmaster, or Mr. Oliver, the senior master, would come striding in to put an end to the general mayhem. Pillow fights were allowed up to a point. Nobody got hurt. But parents sometimes complained if, at the end of the term, a boy came home with a pillow devoid of cotton wool or feathers. Before the explanation of the passage, let's understand the difficult words. Dormitory, a room in a school or hostel with several beds. Leaping, jumping high or a long way. Striding, walking with long steps. Mayhem, confusion. The writer tells his story when he was in a prep school. In his dormitory, there were 30 beds. There were two sides, and on one side, 15 beds. He says that all the boys used to play flying the pillows and jumping high. They stopped when Mr. Fisher, the headmaster, or Mr. Oliver, the senior master, came. They used to come with long steps. The boys were allowed to play only on one condition, that no one should hurt another. But sometimes complaints would come from the parents if their child went home with a pillow with no cotton wool or feathers. In that last year at prep school in Shimla, there were four of us who were close friends. Bimal, whose home was in Bombay, Riaz, who came from Lahore, Bran, who hailed from Vellore, and your narrator, who lived wherever his father, then in the Air Force, was posted. We called ourselves the Four Feathers, the feathers signifying that we were companions in adventure, comrades in arms, and knights of the Round Table. Bimal adopted a peacock's feather as his emblem. He was always a bit showy. Riaz chose a falcon's feather, although we couldn't find one. Difficult words. Hail from, to come from some place as one's hometown or birthplace. Comrades in arms, close companions. The writer says that it was his last year in school in Shimla. He says that in his friends group, they were four in number: Bimal from Bombay, Riaz from Lahore, Bran from Vellore, and he himself. He says that his family had to go anywhere according to the posting of his father. The name of their friends group was the Four Feathers. They had feathers as the sign of their friendship and group. Bran and I were at first offered crows or murgi feathers, but we protested vigorously and threatened a walkout. Finally, I settled for a parrot's feather, taken from Mrs. Fisher's pet parrot, and Bran found a woodpecker's which suited him, as he was always knocking things about. Bimal, who was all thin legs and arms, so light and frisky that at times he seemed to be walking on air. We called him Bambi, after the delicate little deer in the Disney film. Riaz, on the other hand, was a sturdy boy, good at games though not very studious, but always good-natured, always smiling. Bran was a good-looking boy from the south. He was just a little spoiled, hated being given out in a cricket match and would refuse to leave the crease. But he was affectionate and a loyal friend. Difficult words, vigorously, with full energy and power. Walk out, a sudden angry departure, especially as a protest or a strike. Sturdy, strong and healthy. As Bimal took a peacock's feather and Riaz took a falcon's feather, so Bran and the narrator also demanded for the feathers. But they were given the feathers of either a crow or a murgi. They both became angry and said that they would leave if they are not given feathers of other birds. At last, the narrator accepted the feather of the parrot of Mrs. Fisher and Bran got woodpeckers. Bimal was very thin. He was called Bambi. Bambi is a cartoon deer in Disney film. Riaz was strong and healthy, good at games but not at studies. Bran was a good-looking boy. He was a faithful friend also. I was the scribe, good at inventing stories in order to get out of scrapes, but hopeless at sums, my highest marks being 22 out of 100. On Sunday afternoons, when there were no classes or organized games, we were allowed to roam about on the hillside below the school. The four feathers would laze about on the short summer grass, sharing the occasional food parcel from home, reading comics, sometimes a book, and making plans for the long winter holidays. One day, scrambling about among the rocks and thorny bushes below the school, I almost fell over a small bundle lying in a shade of a young spruce tree. On taking a closer look, I discovered that the bundle was really a baby, wrapped up in a tattered old blanket. Difficult words. Scribe. Scribe means a writer. Scrapes. Damages or losses. Scrambling. Climbing up quickly using your hands. The narrator had a spirit of a writer. He used to make different stories himself just to forget the loss, but he was unable to forget about his failing marks. On Sunday afternoons, they used to go on the hillside to have a little fun. There they would spend time on grassy surface, read comics and share their food with one another and making plans for winter vacation. One day the narrator was climbing on the rock quickly. He fell down and saw a baby under the spruce tree. The baby was wrapped up in a tattered old blanket. "Feathers, feathers," I called. "Come here and look. A baby's been left here." The feathers joined me and we all stared down at the infant, who was fast asleep. "Who would leave a baby on the hillside?" asked Bimal. "No one in particular." "Someone who doesn't want it," said Bran. "And hoped some good people would come along and keep it," said Riaz. "A panther might have come along instead," I said. "Can't leave it here." "Well, we'll just have to adopt it," said Bimal. "We can't adopt a baby," said Bran. Difficult words. Infant. A very young child, not more than a year. Panther. A large wild animal of the cat family with black fur. As soon as he saw the baby, he called his friends and asked them to look at it. They looked at the baby and discussed who could leave the baby there. Riaz said, "Let's leave it. Some good people would come and take it." But the narrator suggested that it was not safe to leave the baby as the panther could come. Bimal suggested they needed to adopt it, but Bran refused his idea. "Why not? We have to be married." "We don't, not us, you dope. The grown-ups who adopt babies." "Well, we can't just leave it here for grown-ups to come along," I said. "We don't even know If it's a boy or a girl, said Riaz. Makes no difference. A baby is a baby. Let's take it back to school. And keep it in the dormitory? Of course not. Who is going to feed it? Babies need milk. We'll hand it over to Mrs. Fisher. Difficult words. Dope. A stupid person. Feed. To give food. Now they all got confused if it was right to leave the baby there. If they would not leave, then what would they do? They thought to take to the baby to the school. But a baby needs milk. They got worried where they would get milk for it if they took. Finally, they decided to give it to Mrs. Fisher. She doesn't want one? Look, it's beginning to cry. Let's hurry. Riaz picked up the wide awake and crying baby and gave it to Bimal, who gave it to Bran, who gave it to me. The four fathers marched up to the hill to school with a very noisy baby. Now it's done something in the blanket, I complained, and some of it's on my shirt. Never mind, said Bimal. It's a good cause. You are a Boy Scout, remember? You are supposed to help people in distress. The headmaster and his wife were in their drawing room enjoying their afternoon tea and cakes. Difficult words. Crying, weeping. Scout. A boy belonging to an organization that teaches them skills and to help others. Now the baby started weeping. They passed the baby to each other. They moved on the hills and crossed them. The baby did potty on the shirt of the narrator. His friends reminded him that he was a scout, and a scout did not care such little things while helping. They reached to the house of their headmaster, who was having tea with his wife Mrs. Fisher in the drawing room. We trudged in, and Bimal announced, "We've got something for Mrs. Fisher." Mrs. Fisher took one look at the bundle in my arms and let out a shriek. "What have you brought here, Bond?" "A baby, ma'am. I think it's a girl. Do you want to adopt it?" Mrs. Fisher threw up her arms in consternation and turned to her husband. "What are we to do, Frank? These boys are impossible. They have picked up someone's child." "We'll have to inform the police," said Mr. Fisher, reaching for the telephone. "We can't have lost babies in the school." Difficult words. Trudge. To walk with slow, heavy steps. Shriek. A short, loud noise in a high voice. Consternation. A feeling of anxiety or dismay. They entered the drawing room of Mr. Fisher with slow, heavy steps. Bimal told he had got something for Mrs. Fisher. She looked at the bundle in his arms and asked loudly what they had for her. They showed the baby to her and asked to adopt. She became anxious and asked to her husband what to do with them because she thought they had stolen the baby. Mr. Fisher went near the telephone and took the telephone to tell to the police about it, as he was also anxious and did not like to adopt a stolen baby. Just then there was a commotion outside, and a wild-eyed woman, her clothes disheveled, entered from the front door accompanied by several menfolk from one of the villages. She ran towards us crying out, my baby, mera bachcha, you've stolen my baby." "We found it on the hillside," I stammered. "That's right," said Bran. "Finders keepers." "Quite Adams," said Mr. Fisher, holding up his hand for order and addressing the villagers in a friendly manner. "These boys found the baby alone on the hillside and brought it here before the hyenas caught it," I put in. "Quite right, Bond. And why did you leave your child alone?" he asked the woman. Difficult words. Commotion. Sudden confusion or excitement. Disheveled. Untidy. Before Mr. Fisher could inform the police, they listened some people outside with confusion. Suddenly, a lady in untidy clothes entered from front door. She looked wild. There were many villagers with her. She asked for her baby and accused the boys of stealing her baby. But the boys said that they had found the baby, so it was now theirs. Mr. Fisher quietened them all and explained the matter. He told that the boys had taken the baby for its safety. They all agreed with this statement. The lady was also asked the reason of leaving her baby alone there. I put her down for 5 minutes so that I could climb the plum tree and collect the plums. When I came down, the baby had gone, but I could hear it crying up on the hill. I called the men folk and we came looking for it. Well, here is your baby, I said, thrusting it into her arms. By then I was glad to be rid of it. Look after it properly in future. Kidnapper, she screamed at me. Mr. Fisher succeeded in mollifying the villagers. These boys are good scouts, he told them. It's their business to help people. Difficult words, thrusting, push something suddenly, mollifying, pacifying or making peace. She told that she had put the baby and climbed the tree to pluck plums. When she came down, she did not find her baby, but she listened the cry and told about it to the villagers. Thus she came with them to take it back. The boys returned the baby. They warned her to take care of it. She took the baby and called the boys kidnappers. Mr. Fisher made peace and told that the boys were scouts. They did not kidnap any baby but helped. Scout law number 3, sir, I added, to be useful and helpful. And then the headmaster turned the tables on the villagers. By the way, those plum trees belong to the school. So do the peaches and apricots. Now I know why they've been disappearing so fast. The villagers, a little chastened, went their way. It was really very sweet of them to look after that baby. And look at Bond, he's got baby goo all over his clothes, exclaimed Mrs. Fisher. So he has. Go and take a bath, all of you. And what are you grinning about, Bond? Scout law number 8, sir. A scout smiles and whistles under all difficulties. And so ended the first adventure of the Four Feathers. The boys told about the teachings they were given during their training. Now Mr. Fisher also scolded that the lady herself was a thief. She stole plums from the trees belonging to the school. He told that this was the reason why the plums disappeared from the trees. He told that not only plums but also apricots and peaches were stolen. The villagers listening this left and the boys were asked to take bath. They struggled so much, even then they were smiling because they were taught to smile in all situations. So this was the first adventure of the group, the Four Feathers. Let's see the summary of the chapter. In the story, The Four Feathers, the narrator tells about his life spent in the prep school in Shimla. He, along with his friends, formed a gang of boys called the Four Feathers. They had different features to show their worth in the gang. It meant that they were companions in adventure, comrades in arms, and knights of the Round Table. On Sundays, they used to go on hillside. One day when they went, Bond saw a child wrapped in a torn blanket. First they wanted to leave that, but they did not, because they thought the panther could come there. They took the baby and went to the headmaster. Suddenly the mother of that child came with villagers. She shouted and accused the boys of stealing her baby, but it was not true. When she was asked the reason why she left the baby under the spruce tree, she told she had climbed the tree to pluck the plums. Now the thief was also caught, because from the trees of the school the fruits had been disappearing. Now Mr. Fisher scolded the lady. All the villagers left and the baby was also returned. The boys were appreciated and asked to take a bath. Thus ends the first adventure of the Four Feathers. So this was the chapter The Four Feathers, written by Ruskin Bond. If you care, like, subscribe, share. Thanks.